Thank you, brother. As.L.A.M wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you to the Islamic Society Leading American Muslim, an organization established to conduct da'wah, to invite people to the true and peaceful message of Islam, to educate, empower, nurture folks that come this way, whether they were born into a Muslim family or whether they reverted to Islam. Our culture is non-judgmental, non-castigating, non-criticizing, non-indicting. Our focus is to nurture and love and be merciful to mankind. And I do not believe we have a new person with us today. Okay, so just before I get into the class today, I would just like to sort of do a bit of a prologue, sort of look at what we've been looking at, just to remind you of the sort of content of this curriculum. We've been studying the nafs, the heart, and the four layers of the heart, the I.S.L.A.M and the I.S.L.A.M, the unseen and the seen world, the role of the nafs and the ruh, tawheed, the reality of the unseen, the collective benefits of meeting as a group, how to give victory to the ruh. We've looked at the levels of nafs, the opportunities to refine character, the role of thoughts and their relationship to the nafs. Worshipping Allah is if you see Allah, ihsan, where all actions and deeds stem from, talking about niyyah and the heart, the importance of correct knowledge, the four kinds of thoughts and where they come from and their characteristics. We've talked about hawa, our desires, our inclinations, the importance of the knowledge of fiqh and the levels of sin, so to speak, the Adamic potential of everyone because of the breathing in of the ruh. And we've talked about the heart as farmland, and we've looked at the four stages of cultivation. And then we began to talk about dhikr. These are some of the things that we've talked about today. And today we'll move into focusing quite a bit in terms of meditation and contemplation and some of the proofs around that. I would ask you to continue to praying for Taysir Kiwan, who is stage 4 cancer, to continue praying for Maysoon's grandmother, to continue praying for Dr. Abdul Fattah, who has severe Parkinson's. And is there anyone else we should be praying for that I forgot?
Just the sister Natalie that lives in Wyoming. She's still in my prayer.
Okay, Sister Natalie in Wyoming. Okay. So I ask you and encourage you to make dua for each other and to make dua for those that are presented here, to lift your hands to Allah and ask Allah to intervene for them. And alhamdulillah ta'ala, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده رسوله. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Allah. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, no one can misguide them. Those who are not guided by Allah, there is no guide for them. I bear witness that there is no deity, there is no God worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and messenger. O you who believe, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and die not except as Muslims. Amma ba'd, to proceed. So I just wanted to repeat just the one slide from last week, and then we will continue on. Despite the weight of tazkiyah, the purification of the heart, and dhikr Allah, the remembrance of Allah, these matters are often neglected. For those who seek to tread the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is incumbent on them to adapt their lives to this spiritual component Just as the body needs food to stay healthy, the soul needs its spiritual nourishment. Muslims today must earnestly consider tazkiyah as the number one priority in their life. Probably I should have said number two. The number one priority is the understanding of Tawheed. And once you have the Tawheed, then you want to purify yourself. So it's really, really important. We've been focusing a lot on this, and inshallah, part of that process of tazkiyah, the purifying of yourself, the Prophet ﷺ said to know yourself is to know Allah. And so in order to know yourself, you must do some unveiling. And if you think about how I have described the heart with 4 layers, the unveiling is lifting each layer and seeing what's in there. So we do a lot of unveiling in the therapeutic process. People come in and they work hard to find out, who am I really? Where am I in denial? Where do I subjugate? Where do I do all of these defense mechanisms? And so when we talk about unveiling, we're talking about not being in denial, a fundamental part of the human experience, and it is within the realm of every human being. So what you'll notice as you move about among humans is they often don't know themselves. So in the world we call this an alter ego. So some will try to convince you that they are a very good person, and yet repeatedly they have violated you in some way. So they don't know themselves. Or someone will be really, really angry, and you'll say to them, well, you seem angry, and more angrily they'll tell you, I'm not angry. But everybody else recognizes that they're angry. So it's very important on this path, if you want to purify yourself, to unveil, to find out what's in that heart, to find out who you are. If you're not experiencing this, seek out people who are. It is the next best thing for you to reach higher degrees or stations of certainty where you learn to express your true self. So what is the real true self? The real true self is the fitrah. So you may say, well, that sounds contradictory, because one minute you're telling me to look inside myself and look at my attributes. That's what I refer to myself. So remember that when you're in the spiritual world, you have to look at things on various dimensions. As is seen in the diagram when I talk about alam al-ghayb versus alam al-shad. We are working on different dimensions. So for example, most of the time on this earth, we have a 3-dimensional process. But when we're dealing with the spiritual dimension, according to which scholar you listen to, predominantly we're looking at like 6 different dimensions of things. But we're certainly looking at least another one, which is that which you cannot see with your physical extremities. This level of faith, iman, is a prerequisite for elevated stages, degrees, or station, maqamat, in this religion, which is the whole purpose of outward worship and interaction we have with people. The whole reason that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are trying to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are also obeying Allah when we are trying to elevate ourselves from nafs amara to nafs lawama to nafs mutmainah. When we are trying to move from Muslim to mu'min. When we are trying to move from Islam to ihsan. All of these, Yahamakallah, are stages of development. Islam is not a religion that you embrace and then stagnate. Now I'm a Muslim, I don't have to do anything else. Now, it's very interesting because in Christianity, that's pretty much the approach. Jesus did it all for you, so you don't have to do anything. You just get saved and then you don't have to do anything. That's not the dimension of Islam. That's not how Islam works. As you unveil or remove the vices, so another meaning here of unveiling is that you must identify the vices that you have. You must identify the characteristics in your life that are contrary to the way the messenger operated. You must recognize the attributes in your life or characteristics in your life that are considered haram or makruh. And if something is distasteful to Allah and you love Allah, do you do it? No. If you really love Allah and something is makruh, you will do it as little as you can. So I'll just give an example. It is makruh for a man to stand up and urinate. Why? Because the urine spatters back on you and you've lost your wudu, and how you're going to make your wudu? With urine all over your clothing. So the next thing is, what if I'm in a public restroom and it's filthy and this is the cleanest way? This is why it's makruh. It's not a sin. But every time you avoid the makruh, you get a reward. Every time you participate in the makruh, you don't get punished, but you don't get the reward. But if you really love Allah, you're going to be focused on unveiling, really taking account of yourself. And we know that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ did this every single night of his life. He took account of what he could have done, perhaps that would have pleased Allah even more. This was a perfect man. Adorn yourself with constructive virtues such as repentance, patience, gratefulness, tawheed, reliance on Allah, self-examination and self-accountability, meditation and contemplation, particularly on death. I'm not quite sure, but it's in my heart to teach the class that I taught many years ago on death. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that an astute believer multiplies their memory of death. There is no one here that can escape death. Every one of us are going to die. And how we prepare for the provisions for that day has a lot to do with unveiling. If I do not rid myself of the vices that I have by unveiling and finding out what they are and intentionally getting rid of them, annihilating them from the root, eschew evil means to annihilate from the root, then I am not going to fare as good on that day. And we all want to, inshallah, reach the station of certainty within our iman. There are people who have shaky iman. One day they get up and they say, MashaAllah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. I hit the feet running. I hit the floor running. And then there are people that the next day they wake up and they say, I don't know about this Islam. I don't know, man. I don't know. This is a hard religion, man. I don't know. All these things I got to do. And so that iman fluctuates. What we are striving to do, and we'll talk about it more today, inshallah, is to get to a state, a hal of certainty, where we have no doubt. I always think of the verse, herein is a book wherein there is no doubt. When I have this book and possess this book and possess the knowledge of this book and have belief that there's no doubt. This is where we all want to get. This requires the acquisition of different types of knowledge. Imam Ghazali's Ulam ad-Din, Iya Ulam ad-Din, the revival of religious learning, is a source providing that knowledge. I will warn you that it is, some of the translations are, some of the numbers are wrong in terms of the verses, and it's not always grammatically correct. But I can tell you that if you overlook that for the value of the content, and I will also share with you that they are the first books that I purchased before I did my Shahada. So before I became a Muslim, I read those 4 volumes, and they really appealed to me. And about every year, every 2 years at the very max, I go through them again, all 4 volumes. And I would highly encourage you to do that. And when you finish the class today, inshallah, you will understand more why I'm encouraging you to do that. In Surah 58, verse 11, O believers, when you are asked to make room in your meetings, collective life, make room. Allah will make room for you in the hereafter. And if you are told to rise up, then rise up. Allah will rise to higher ranks those of you who have faith and knowledge. So you must have knowledge, but you must have correct knowledge. If your understanding is wrong and your practice is wrong, you will get a wrong result. So this is why it is so important that you do not rely upon Sheikh Google or Sheikh Yahoo for your answers. And if you find a teacher that tells you stuff but cannot give you the proof for what they're saying, chances are you're in danger. You're in the danger zone. Because a lot of people will tell you Islam says this and Islam says that, but they will not give you the proofs. So I encourage you to make sure that you can back up what you say. And this is why Allah said that those who know and those who do not know, are they equal? He even poses this question to us. When this knowledge is implemented, it bequeaths a higher state. So remember the hadith about the donkey. I can take a donkey, I can put the Quran on the donkey, I can put 9 volumes of Sahih Bukhari, 4 volumes of Sahih Muslim, I can put a couple of fiqh books on the donkey. The donkey is carrying all of the knowledge, but it's still a donkey. Unless the donkey can implement that knowledge will actually be a curse to the donkey, because he's walking around with all that weight and doesn't know what to do with it. So I say to young Muslims, be careful. I encourage you to go to knowledge, but sometimes people get overzealous. They get a whole bunch of knowledge, and instead of focusing on the fundamentals, which is what they really need in the beginning, they focus on the unseen kind of knowledge, and they get overwhelmed, because you got to eat mashed potatoes before you eat steak. It's very important, folks. Accurate knowledge and the right level of knowledge. But it is through the correct knowledge and implementation that you will get to higher states. You can take everything that I've taught you in this particular curriculum, but if you do not implement it, it is actually not going to benefit you very much at all. It might help your ego if you want to show off and show people that you have this knowledge. Then your ego might get stroked, but that's really not going to help you at all spiritually. Ibn Abbas said about the learned, the rank or station of the learned is 700 times more than that of the believers. And the difference between the ranks is the distance of the path of 500 years. So one of the very sad things is that in modern times, people do not respect their teachers. So if you go about to any party, you will hear people talking about Islamic teachers in a horrible way and talking about imams in a horrible way. It's like an epidemic. Make sure when people do that you tell them, these are avenues to my heart. I don't want to hear anything bad about that person. However, if they come and say this person is an imam, but they molested me, that's a different story. That's a need to know. So I want to make sure I'm very clear here. There is in fiqh some certain reasons why you absolutely have to talk about somebody. But make sure you're within that. And if you don't know that, I encourage you to let somebody show you in the fiqh the occasions when you are allowed to talk about someone. And in that event, we should not be cowards. We must rise up. We must be strong in our man and confront something when it's wrong. In Surah 39, verse 9, is one who worships devoutly during the hours of the night, prostrating him or herself, or standing in adoration, who takes heed of the hereafter, and who places his or her hope in the mercy of his Lord or her Lord, like the one who does not. Say, are those equal to those who know and those who do not know? It is those who are endued with understanding that receive admonition. There are people that have a lot of knowledge. You hear them talking, but they don't have understanding. So they'll give you a piece of knowledge, but you say, well, help me understand that. Well, that's all I know. I got the raw information. We want to understand. Our goal is to understand. Not to have this black and white letter of the law idea, but to have the spirit of the law, the essence of the law. And it's very important when you are reading and contemplating and pondering on the Quran and the Sunnah that you look for the essence of what is being said or what is being done. In Surah 35, verse 28, and as there are in men and women, and in crawling beasts, and in cattle too, many colors, of all Allah's servants, only such as are endowed with innate knowledge stand truly in awe of Allah. If you want to stand in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you must have innate knowledge. And that word innate is key here. It's sort of repeating what I just got through saying in the previous slide. I must have a heart relationship with this knowledge. I must be connected with this knowledge at my inner level, not at my head. If it is just a head trip, I'm not going to experience the unseen part of that knowledge. It's just going to be very sort of raw intelligence, pieces of information. To reach the higher stages of Islam, you must have experiential gnosis. You must have an experiential knowledge of what you are learning. And how do I get that? I get that by implementing it. Once I learn a principle in Islam and I implement it, then I can actually talk about it innately because I've experienced the benefits of obedience or avoiding what was prohibited. If I only know it says this, but I've never actually implemented it, do I have that? I do not. I only have the raw, surface level information. It's like water. If I had a person in this room and they had never experienced water, they did not know the word water, they did not know what water was, and I'm trying to explain it to you, but I don't have any water to show you. It'd be very hard to understand the concept of a liquid, but as soon as I threw my cup of water in your face, you would get it. You would have an experiential knowledge of water, and probably earth shaking, never forget it. And this is the relationship that we want to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the kalam of Allah, the speech of Allah. Verily Allah is Almighty, much forgiving. In Surah 13 verse 43, and if they who are bent on denying the truth say unto thee, O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, thou hast not been sent by Allah, say thou, none can bear witness between me and you as Allah does, and none can bear witness as does he or she who truly understands this divine writ. Do you understand chemistry just because you read a chemistry book? And this is why in many of the sciences, not only do you have the theoretical lesson, but you have a lab. And you go in and you experiment with the knowledge that you've had. Amal in Arabic is hope or aspiration. With experiential spiritual knowledge, one attains an even higher state, allowing one to do things by way of amal that one previously could not and others cannot. When I have knowledge, experiential knowledge, and I have a hope and an aspiration to please my Lord, my knowledge will actually move into another dimension. Not only will it be experimental, it goes deeper than that. It will come with something that can't be seen. I can't show you aspiration. I can't show you hope, can I? So you will actually achieve things from an unseen dimension. And it's important to have balance. Al-Mizan, the balance. So we have Mizan al-Amal, the criterion or balance of action. Treading the path of felicity is the determination of the intelligent folk, and its neglect is the heedlessness of the ignorant. And may Allah forgive me, but I believe this came from Imam Ghazali. It's something I remembered, but I'm pretty sure it came from Imam Ghazali. Let me read it again. Treading the path of felicity is the determination of the intelligent folks, and its neglect is the heedlessness of the ignorance. So what do we know? We know that when the Prophet ﷺ became a Prophet ﷺ and he was dealing with people, they were called the people of ignorance, Jahil, the people of Jahiliyyah. They did not know. At that time, they had no experiences with Islam. Their experiences were with desert, with date wine, with poetry. Very much whatever they were doing in the world. One cannot travel this road without correct knowledge of it. Knowledge and action, worship, are the path to felicity. Success and salvation will not be achieved except by knowledge and action or worship together. So our actions are, insha'Allah, ibadah. They come with an intention. so that every single thing that I do, inshallah, has an intention that I'm doing it for the sake of Allah, fi sabilillah, in the cause of Allah, in the way of Allah, and then it becomes worship. If I'm teaching this class so that people can go out and say, MashaAllah, I went to Imam Sykes' class, then that's for my ego. And that is not going to help me spiritually. That's actually going to make me sick spiritually. That's going to be toxic. Whoever is, and this is from Imam Ghazali, whoever is overwhelmed by an ailment and the consensus of medical texts and consultations with their varying specialties state that the cure for the malady is a cold cure, the abstention from taking the cure by the patient is a stupidity in his intellect. Indeed, it is a requirement of intellect to initiate the measures of taking the cure. Indeed, he or she may then find an independent means. Until that is realized, not by imitating the masses, on the contrary, by verifying the true reality of the malady and the ways that are valid for its cause to be cured. He or she will then rise with clear vision if he or she searches, becomes independent, surges above the perigee, which is the point nearest the center, which has a deeper meaning, a spiritual meaning. Where are we trying to get back to? To be centered is to be connected to that seed of my heart, the fitra, the ruh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of imitation or mimicry and compliance to the apogee, the highest point in the development of something, a climax or culmination of scrutiny. I know this is a complicated quote. It is a lot. We could spend a day meditating and pondering and reflecting over this quote. But in simple, and I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to take a picture of this and spend a half hour contemplating about what this means. Maybe more if you have it. It's very deep, but it has a lot of meaning. So the realization of this station is with cognition and verification. The realization of this state is with cognition, the knowledge, and verification. I verify it by implementing it. I verify what Allah has said when I obey, and then I have the experience that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised me. Non-verified information is not nearly as impactful as that which you've experienced, that which is verified by your own experience. Because that verification does what? It reinforces your behavior. And your behavior, if you're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is good. Not realizing the reality of death is the removal of the instrument from useful function to the annihilation of the user. Knowing that the felicity, delight, and repose are attained in its distinctive perfection. This also comes from Imam Ghazali. Knowing the distinctive perfection of humanity is the realization of the reality of rationales for what it is, not what is illusionary and sensible, which it has in common with animals. So here basically we're looking at operating with the sixth sense. We're looking at operating with the spiritual eyes and the spiritual ears and the spiritual brain, the akal cue, the one not from akal brain, but the one from here. Knowing that the soul itself is thirsty for it, knowledge and action, and by its nature has prepared for it. Allah actually made our soul, wired us, programmed us to do this. This is what human beings were programmed for. What distracts the body is overwhelming afflictions and its occupation with carnal desires. And I can't tell you how many times in my years that I've had people that have been overseas studying, and I would be working with them and they would do some travesty, some very major thanoob. And why? Because they're not implementing the knowledge that they gain. And I mean from imams to hafiz to students of great teachers. Because they get the knowledge and they want to teach the knowledge, but they don't implement it. Quite honestly, I prefer my teachers to implement what they teach. But if I had to go to them to learn, I would recognize that their practice is flawed, that their practice is weak. But I will take the knowledge and then I will implement it, inshallah. If he or she has devoted him or herself to contemplation and meditation in the majesty of the heavens and earth, indeed in contemplating the marvels of what is created in him or herself, then he or she would have attained his or her personal level of perfection. And again, when we're talking about spiritual perfection, we're not talking about perfection in the eyes of the dunya. We're not talking about Webster's definition of perfection. We're talking about a definition of perfection that you can only understand by going and studying what Allah has said about this perfection and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Indeed, then he or she would be blissful on earth, for there is no significance of felicity save for the soul's attainment of its potential perfection, even though the levels of perfection are countless. However, he or she will not feel that delight so long as he or she is in this world, prohibited by senses, illusions, and afflictions of the soul. The situation is similar to the person who is presented with a savory dish, but his or her taste buds are numb, and numbness dissipates. Then he or she will sense the ultimate delectation. So if I bring a delicious dish to you, and for those of you who've had to take certain medications, or perhaps have had cancer and your taste buds disappear, you don't appreciate the delicious gift. But when the taste buds come back, you can't get enough of it. You will actually have to implement the knowledge of a third and a third and a third, and pray that you'll do that, because your desires will kick in, your nafs will kick in, and you'll want 2 or 3 plates. What if our appetite spiritually was that way? That we overcame the numbness of our spirit, and our spirits had a hunger and a thirst for an understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. Death is like the dissipation of anesthetizing. So what I talk about often in the therapeutic process is that people anesthetize their physical pain. And how many ways do we do that? We run away, we avoid, we deny, we pretend. We eat, we drink, we do drugs, we have sex, we do all of these things to run away. Humans do these things. Advanced students in the way of Allah will perceive paradise while he or she is on earth. We will perceive the I.S.L.A.M al-Ghaib when we are in the I.S.L.A.M al-Dunya. And we will perceive of the loftiest Firdaus, the highest layer of heaven, will be within our heart. So like Yusuf A.S., when he was seduced, he said, "Oh Allah, make heaven, make paradise more beautiful to me than this woman." It is attained by freeing oneself from the trappings of the world and the placement of most of his or her effort in contemplating divine matters until the divine revelation is clearly manifested to him or her. See, we have to have determination. We have to have spiritual tenacity that I'm going to keep implementing this Quran that I know until I'm convicted of it. Until I absolutely have no doubt This is achieved when his or her soul is purified from earthly defilements, from those vices that are inside of us. And those vices were not learned from our fitra. Those vices were learned from the dunya, from our environment. And that is why it is so important to cultivate an environment for inner spiritual development. If you don't believe it, watch a child, a pure child from home, go to the public school system and watch what happens to them in about 2 years. Their whole personality will change. Watch them when you put them in daycare, what they bring back home to your environment. These are those are the reports of a group that claim gnosis by knowledge and action towards felicity. What they have said is sound, and they claim it will not be known except by struggle and devotional exercises of deep reflection and contemplation. If you want to get to these states, if you want to get to a place where you are convicted absolutely beyond any shadow of a doubt of your Lord, then you must involve yourself with contemplation, with reflection. As a matter of fact, I call it the abandoned sunnah. People often say, tell me the books to read. They read the books. They can tell you about the book, but do they actually implement what they learned in the book? If I have a library of 2,500 books, but I haven't implemented it, I have a whole lot of knowledge, but I don't have a lot of experience with those books. Eternal bliss is everlasting without demise, pleasure without effort, felicity without tragedy, prosperity without poverty, perfection without defect, and esteem without humiliation. If we want to have eternal bliss, if we want to get to paradise, this is what this eternal bliss will be for us. Here on the earth, we always have the bipolar effect. We have that dichotomy. One day we might be experiencing felicity, and the next day we might be experiencing tragedy. One day we might be prosperous, and the next day we might be bankrupt. But if we get to paradise, we will never have that. We'll just have bliss. The second half of Imam Ghazali's I.S.L.A.M addresses experiential knowledge, and that's why I encourage you to read these books. Ibn Qayyim, read everything you can read that he has written about the soul, the ruh, and the heart. Everything you can read and implement it. Don't just read unless you're going to implement, because you won't get where you think you want to go. Unless you just want knowledge, perhaps, to show off with, because it's not going to benefit you. Every time you implement showing off, you're committing shirk, the biggest sin in Islam. Practice begins based on the level or station of one's heart, and the level of one's heart determines how we act or practice outwardly. When you do something, it will tell you what is in your heart. If the Quran is alive in your heart and you're convicted, it will tell you. Just look at your actions. The stronger one's iman, faith, the more one has realized virtues like tawakkul, reliance or trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan within oneself. So if you want to develop tawakkul, then you must have knowledge and you must implement it. Otherwise, how can you trust the knowledge? Do you really know what you're talking about? So Allah says this and that settles it. But you never implemented it? Isn't that a little phony? Isn't that a little superficial? The more we actually know and truly believe in the attributes of Allah's names, like Ar-Razaq, the giver of sustenance, and the other 98 attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we experience that attribute without relying on the means. As humans, we will always be connected to the means. The asbabs are in fact the means, the reasons for something. The stronger the inner state of one's heart becomes, the more subtle the relationship we have with the means. Meditation in Islam is based on two things: tafakkur and tadabbur. And I want to talk about these because these are vital if you want to reach higher levels. And tafakkur is an act of worship defined as comprehensive contemplation, spiritual reflection, and critical thinking, meditation over one's sins, creation and yourself to take lessons from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And what's very sad is that it is very difficult to find a lot of information on tafakkur and tadabbur. It's just not, they're not volumes. So you got to go out there, and this is why I encourage you to look at Ibn Qayyim's works and Imam Ghazali's works. There are some modern scholars, but in my opinion, only in my opinion, Allah knows best, their grammar may be perfect, but somehow the essence of what is seen in my experience is not as valuable as what these scholars had. It's like going back a little closer to the message. So for example, if you could get a message from a Sahaba, or you could get a message from a 7th or 8th century Imam, where would you like to get your information? From those who were the closest to the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At-tadabbur linguistically derives from the Arabic word ad-dubur, which is the end of something. Dubur ad-da'ba, that is the end of the riding beast. Tadbir and tadabbur of an affair is the consideration of the consequences of the affair. That is, to consider what the end result will lead to. So tafakkur is about contemplating, and tadabbur is more about being able to be aware of the end result, more like consequence oriented, if that will help you at all. Therefore, tadabbur is thinking and understanding. And remember that we began these classes by talking about thoughts. We talked about the role of a khatir, a thought. And then what do you do with that thought? And where did that thought come from? Did it come from the shaitan? Did it come from your nafs? Did it come from the angels? Or did it come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And these are the only places that thoughts come from. These 4 areas. And then we talked about the characteristics of each of these kind of thoughts, these messages. You need to know them. It's the only way you can truly guard yourself, is to be able to recognize a thought that comes to you and to say, is that from my nafs or is that from the shaitan? At-tadabbur and al-ittibar, consideration, a lesson or example, consideration of the past, al-ittibar, contemplation and discernment. It's interesting, the Bible says the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit, for they are foolishness unto him. This natural man is the man who is not in touch with his fitra, the man who is not in touch with his ruh. He's just an earthly man. We call them carnal people. So we need to be able to discern. And to discern requires contemplation. I really got to process what's going on here. Therefore, al-ittibar is the condition of psychological framework with which the knowledge of something observed leads to the knowledge of something unobserved. So I have a seen piece of knowledge that everybody can see, but I take it to the level that I learned something I did not see before. And this is what contemplation does for one. If I never contemplate, I'm only going to see what I see in black and white. In conventional language, at-tadabbur is a term meaning the consideration of the consequences of things, and it is similar in meaning to the term at-tafakkur, to get that shedda on that fa and the dhamma on the ka. All right. About thinking is the behavior of the heart when considering a proof, and tadabbur is the behavior of the heart with the consideration of the final consequences. So look at how the heart is employed not only to get the knowledge, but to consider the knowledge and implement it, to have a deep relationship with knowledge. It's not a superficial experience. In Surah 3, verses 190 and 191, there are exemplary signs for people of wisdom, hikmah, and understanding in the criterion of the heavens and earth, in the alternation of night and day, their lengthening and shortening. They always remember Allah while they are standing, while they are sitting, while they are laying on their sides, and they meditate over the creation of the heavens and earth. They say, "O our Lord, you did not create them in vain. You are far from it, from creating useless, meaningless things. Protect us from the torment of hell." And this is amazing here, this verse. This verse has volumes and volumes and volumes of meaning. Because look what it reminds you of in the last sentence. That if you don't contemplate on the heavens and the earth, meditate when you're all the time, because most of the time in life we're either standing, sitting, or lying on our sides. Now there may be a few exceptions for people that stand on their head. But I think because most people and humans don't stand on their head, it's covered. Allah tells us that nothing is in vain, so don't take it just at the surface level. Understand the inner dimensions and the deeper meaning of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Imam Ghazali said that tafakkur is half of ibadah. This contemplation and this meditation on knowledge is half of worship. Tafakkur is a mirror that reflects both one's goodness and evils. Now, I've sort of put most of this in my own words, but this is coming from Imam Ghazali. Tadabbur is pondering, reflecting, and critically thinking over the meaning of Quran and contemplating them. Comprehensive and deep thinking and consideration. In Surah 23, verse 68, have they not pondered over the word of Allah? What is sent down to the Prophet, or has ﷺ, or has there come to them what had not come to their fathers of old? So we are asked, did you ponder, or did you just read? So you can say, well, I read my 30th today, alhamdulillah. Well, what did you learn? Nothing. But I got through it, alhamdulillah. Allah asks us to ponder. Islam promoted free thinking. And this has unfortunately been abandoned by Muslims predominantly. So we don't have a lot of scholarship anymore. We have people like me that are just teaching what I've learned from other people. Predominantly. In Surah 38:29, this is a book, the Quran, which we have sent down to you, full of blessings that they may ponder over its verses, and that men and women of understanding may remember. Pondering helps you remember. It's sort of like studying. The first time you hear your professor say something, then you read it in the text because we're supposed to read. And then perhaps you see it on the test And then maybe you remember it, because that's 3 times that you saw that material. In Surah 4, verse 82, do they not then consider the Quran carefully? Had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein much contradiction. So we are commanded to consider it carefully, meditate, contemplate, ponder, and reflect. A linguistic analysis of these words indicates the asbab, that is, what is actually happening in a given process that is taking place. See, a lot of times we see something taking place and we make a subjective reality. But it's all on the surface. It's just what we saw. We have no clue of the inner dimension of what we were watching. It is the crossing over of the superficial outward meaning or reason of something to a lesson or deeper inner knowledge that one can take from what is or was happening. So often when I'm working with people, I'll say, I'm trying to get to what is. Not what you think, not what he said, that she said, that they said, that we said, that they're going to do or was going to do or is going to do. But what is? Tell me what I'm working with here. Deep thinkers don't see events just as an event. They see them as a part of God's planning system, GPS. And if you have certainty of faith, no matter what you experience, you will look at it with a deeper meaning. I don't care whether it's cancer or a heart attack, a stroke, I don't care what it is. If you have this level of certainty, you will look at it and ponder and reflect on what did Allah say about this. Some will ponder the sunnah for ways to cut corners and do someone in or do something wrong. So somebody's taking a picture, so if I don't advance it, know that I will as soon as the cameras are put down. So some people do cherry picking. They go and they try to find a part of the sunnah or a part of the Quran, and then they want to use it to do somebody in. If you live very long as a Muslim, you will get to hear this. People will take verses out of Quran and out of context in the Quran, use it to beat their wives. But if you don't know the Messenger of Allah, that he never even expressed dismay to his servant, then you will miss the boat. What appeared to be an opportunity or an advantage on the surface was actually toxicity to your heart. Every time you take a corner, so people will say, well, the fiqh tells me I can gossip. I say, yeah, if the person has done something that is detrimental to the community, or to you that would be detrimental to the community. And then do you tell the whole community, or do you tell someone who has some influence in the community? Someone that can make a difference? If we develop virtues like sabr, patience, we won't find ourselves in compromised positions. That means we'll do what is right. And sabr is so important because most people, as soon as they get angry, they forget what Allah and His Messenger has said about anger. They forget that they are intoxicated. And they don't ponder and reflect exactly what is the unmet need. What happened to me right now? No, they blame it on the person in front of them. And then they convince that person that it's their fault. So you need to know about anger. If you're a believer, you need to know that the Prophet ﷺ said don't go near to anger. He didn't say don't get angry. He said don't even go near it. When you get that first twinge of dis-ease in your heart, I do not like what that person said. It might be a good idea to say, you know, that statement that you made created dis-ease in my heart. I need to go and contemplate about this. I need to find out what is within myself that made me want to react. And then what did the Messenger of Allah say? He said, the first thing you do if you get angry and it doesn't work, sit down. I'm sorry. sit down. If that doesn't work, lay down. If that doesn't work, make your wudu. If that doesn't work, pray. He's telling you, contemplate. Take some time out. But don't hurt somebody. Don't be unmerciful to somebody because something is happening inside of you. You're the one that has the problem. The moment that you feel dis-ease in your life, you are the one that has the problem. Doesn't mean that the other person is right or wrong. You got a problem. When your heart is diseased, you've got a spiritual problem. You've got a spiritual flu. And it has the potential to destroy you, to wipe you out for days. People get angry and they're angry for days. People get angry and they're angry for weeks. And what happens to the Islam when they're angry for 3 days or a week? How can you have certainty of faith when you're walking around like a hothead? This is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to do things with preponderance and excellence. Tafuk, sorry. I hope I have that right. I think it's tafuk. And it requires learning to read by pondering and reflecting on our environment and what is happening around us without passing judgment on others, but learning for our own sake. There's a reason that the culture of Islam Inc. is non-judgmental. It is an effort to implement the way of our messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The idea is to invest our energy in exerting ourselves to understand and see what one can normally not see. It is like having eyes in the back of one's head. This spiritual insight is of such benefit to you if you grow it, if you nurture it, that you try to see everything. When you see somebody angry, you don't say, "Why are you angry?" You say, "It looks like you're hurting." Because every angry person is a hurting person. There's an unmet need in there, and we focus on the deeper level. Tell me what's hurting you. The idea is to invest our energy in exerting ourselves to understand and see what we normally would not see. Otherwise, if that is how you operate in your life, you're a person that works on the surface. I totally depend on what I see. And if we want to see how insecure that is, and what a poor way to approach things, get 10 people to watch a car accident and get 10 people to write down what happened. And you'll get 10 different stories about what happened. And this is why we cannot rely on the 5 senses. We must look deeper. Because all 10 of those people, surely they're not all 10 deceived. But they all 10 have a different story about what I saw it with my own eyes. I heard him say this. But did you know what was in his heart or her heart? The idea is to invest energy to learn what one normally can't learn, see, or have access to, and this requires time doing this consistently. Plan daily time for reflection. And I'm going to recommend a book to you. Just bear with me a minute here. I want to see, wow. We'll pick this up next week. It's too much to go into today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A recommended reading is the Book of Assistance by Imam Abdullah ibn Alawi al-Haddad. Imam Haddad walks one through a list of objects of reflection that are extremely helpful. The idea of reflection is to fixate your thoughts on a particular thing for an extended period of time, not letting your thoughts or self stray to thinking about something else. And I think this book is available through Amazon for $17.98, something like that. How much? $11.79. Alhamdulillah. I can't see from here, but it is only one of those. Yeah. There are many fruits in reflection. Two of the greatest is that one, your relation to the thing you are reflecting on will change after you spend sufficient time reflecting. And number two, stopping one's thoughts to reflect will produce something very beautiful in oneself. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Then I'm going to go down to the questions for discussion. I will pick this up, inshallah, if somebody reminds me where to pick up next week, because
What slide number is it?
let's see if I can do that with this program. That is slide number 336.
And do you know what stronghold is?
Pardon me?
Stronghold.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. So I love you all for the sake of Allah. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open all of the doors, the windows, the layers of your heart, and allow this ideology, these lessons from Quran and Sunnah to be embedded in the very seat of your heart, and that you will learn to implement this in your life so that you can actually experience felicity on this earth. Because when you have certainty of Iman, that is what you will experience. I ask you to forgive me. Anything that I said wrong is from my arrogance and my ego. Anything that I've said right, all the glory and honor goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I covet your prayers. As-salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.